Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I thought I would answer the question of, is it really necessary for us to bulk? Objectively speaking, if you look at the scientific evidence, there isn't really actually significant evidence that we have to have a real calorie surplus to gain muscle or to even make great gains in muscle mass. Now, can we make the argument that there's practical mathematical needs for a person to bulk? Sure, absolutely. Now, keeping in mind, if your goal is purely raw leverage strength, yes, gaining fat makes sense. If your goal is to gain muscle for the purpose of getting stronger, then no, it doesn't necessarily make sense to do so. So we need to be clear in the distinction between these two things. So let me explain what I mean in terms of the gaining muscle. We can pretty much recomposition almost indefinitely up to a certain threshold. Okay, so you can gain muscle and lose fat at pretty close to maintenance calories for extremely long periods of time. If someone says, well, what scientific evidence we have, that is what all the evidence shows. It's shown that for decades. Never really been necessary to have like a 300 or 400 calorie surplus ever to gain maximum muscle. This isn't supported by any research, including in advanced lifters and serious athletes, anything else. Like, data on advanced athletes and lifters has always shown that recomposition is absolutely possible. Now, when I say this, people are saying, but didn't you disagree with this years ago? I did disagree with this years ago. However, as I've looked at the not only the old data, but the newest research, and we have to be current with the research, okay? So when someone says, well, you can't just flip-flop, well, yeah, when multiple studies are coming out and your own life experience as a coach and as an athlete yourself match the research, yeah, you absolutely can and should change your mind. And it doesn't matter what you previously said. If you're going to be an intellectually honest person who wants to give the best information, you need to do that. Let me be clear. If you're going to be an honest person who gives out the best information, you have to do that. You have to do that, and it doesn't matter how it's perceived. Because here's what I would say. Would you rather be perceived as someone who never changes their mind by people who want you to be dogmatic, but then you lie? Or you then deceive people to do so? Or would you rather be an honest person who is putting out the best information at the expense of someone saying that you're flip-flopping? Okay? So it's a matter of, do you want to do the right thing or do you want to preserve a reputation? Well, if we're going to go with the right thing, then that's what we need to do. Okay? And it's even more important when you're giving advice to people who are paying you. So that's what the data shows. Okay? And practically speaking, we can make some exceptions. But from a data-driven perspective, there's no real evidence that we have to bulk. Now, people say, well, that can't be true because we can't be 160 pounds forever. And you're right. So practically speaking, yes, there's going to come a point where if you want to be 180 pounds lean versus 160 pounds lean, you are going to have to gain 20 pounds at some point in there. However, could it be accrued over slow periods of time? Or could a person do a 5-pound bulk in 1 year and just recomp for the next year? Could they do a 5-pound bulk and then recomp for the next year? Sure, you could do that too for 4 or 5 years straight. That would actually work. Totally doable. But we come over to that point. That's only because you then need to gain weight. And why would we need to gain weight? Well, because at a certain point, recomposition does get really hard when you get super lean. There's a point where, you know, you're going to have to go, man, if I want to gain a certain amount of muscle and I'm already down to 10% body fat, I'm probably going to have to gain some weight. Because then, or you're trying to recomp at 10% or 9%, you're going to get more and more shredded, and maybe you don't want to be that shredded. There can also come a point where even that might start to compromise some stuff. Okay. So that's really your exception. Here's the reason you might actually, practically speaking, need to gain weight. You ready? When you're as lean as you really want to be. When you step back and go, I don't really want to get any leaner than I am now. Well, then to gain muscle, you're going to need a surplus because otherwise you're going to lose a little body fat. You know, every pound of muscle you're gaining is going to strip away a pound of fat to be near the same body weight. So yeah, practically speaking, there may come a point where a person says, hey man, I'm just too lean. Now, we get into this whole idea, people say, but if people stay lean all the time, they're just spinning their wheels. And I see it all the time, but are they really spinning their wheels? Or are they just impatient? In other words, we've absolutely seen plenty of people who have abs and a six-pack and are lean, and they just slowly accumulate muscle for the next 5 or 10 years while staying lean. It absolutely happens. But because they don't get large jumps in body weight, or because they don't ever gain fat leverages on their squat and bench press, because those are exercises that benefit from fat. Some of your lifts will go down, but I mean, it's a known fact, putting 10 pounds of fat will make your squat and your bench press go up. But not because you got stronger at the muscular level of contracting harder, it's because you have squish and leverage differences. So sure, it's going to seem slower, but is it really? I would suggest to those people that their nutrition itself is still not dialed in. I would suggest that their training is not dialed in. Like if you're not making any gains, and I get it if you're super advanced and elite. There's people who say, well, Jason, you're squatting 500, you were there whatever years ago. Okay, but I'm also 48 and an elite lifter. Yeah, there's going to come a point where sometimes I'm going to have long periods of time without significant gains. Like we get that. I also did a cut, and I've been rebuilding the strength from that. But so setting that sort of exception aside, let's come back over to 99% of the population. Let's assume you're not middle-aged and already an elite lifter, which is going to be 99.99% of you listening. All right, so you're not me in that case. Okay, good. So let's get over to it. Well, then you can probably expect to make some slow gains all the time. Okay, perfectly reasonable, right? It's just that it may seem slower because you're not seeing big jumps in scale weight. You're not getting leverage. You're not getting move. But the gains are there. And if they're not, is your nutrition itself not good? You're not eating enough protein, not enough healthy foods. Are you not getting enough sleep? Does your training suck? And I think that's the thing that we have to ask with some of that too. We've got to ask that question and be honest with ourselves. If you're not making gains, does your training suck? And I'm going to just flat out say, yeah, that's probably the case. So before we look at, man, I'm just not gaining any weight, and I get it, if you're 155 pounds and you have a six-pack and deep abs, okay, yeah, that's probably a point where practically we need to start gaining some weight. But I see way too many guys who are not shredded, who are like, oh, I got to do a bulk. I'm like, dude, you're already 15% body fat. You could probably recomp your next 10 pounds of muscle growth over a few years. Like, it's just not necessary. And there's no evidence to support that it is. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.